Ever think about, like, what happens after a crime scene's wrapped? I'm not talking about the next episode, the trial, all that. I
Mhm.
mean, literally, who cleans up that mess? Well, today we're diving into a world most people would rather avoid: trauma scene cleanup.
Yeah, it's definitely not for the faint of heart.
Not at all. We're talking serious decontamination, procedures you wouldn't believe.
Hmm.
Way more than just bleach and a mop. And to help us unpack this, we've got some insights from CARSI. That's a leading group that trains these cleanup crews.
The material is fascinating, gets into the nitty-gritty of what these folks deal with.
Totally. And that's what we're doing too, going beyond just the ick factor, We're going to uncover the emotional, even psychological side of this work, stuff you definitely won't see on Law& Order.
Right, because there's a human cost to dealing with trauma, even after the fact.
Exactly. So to kick things off, CARSI talks about these super specific standards cleanup crews have to follow. ANSI, ICRC 540, OSHA regulations. Maybe not typical water cooler talk.
You think those are just for show? Trust me, they are not.
Right. So why are these regulations so important in this line of work?
Because we're not dealing with your average spill here. Trauma scenes, they can involve bloodborne pathogens, nasty bacteria, all sorts of biohazards you literally can't see. These standards are about protecting everyone, the crew, of course, but also anyone who steps foot in that space later. It's serious stuff.
So it's not just making it look clean, it's making it safe on like a microscopic level.
Exactly. For instance, that ANSI standard you mentioned, it outlines the exact decontamination procedures for different biohazards. So if it's, say, blood, different protocol than, I don't know, something else. Got to make sure future occupants aren't at risk,
Right.
right?
This is why you can't just DIY this stuff. You need trained pros who know what they're dealing with.
100%. And even beyond the technical side, there's a whole human element to this work. That's where things get really interesting.
Totally. Karma 2 actually mentions emotional sensitivity is a key skill for these professionals.
Yeah.
Not something you'd immediately think of, right? But what does that actually look like in the field?
Okay, so picture this. You walk into a space where something awful just happened. Maybe a crime, an accident. The sights, the smells, it's overwhelming enough. But then you add on the fact that you know, a human tragedy just unfolded here.
Heavy stuff.
It is. And you've got families grieving, first responders, maybe they're still there, still processing what they've seen. And these cleanup technicians, they're right there in the middle of it all.
Man, that's a lot to handle. On top of the actual, biohazard cleanup, how do they cope with that emotional weight?
That's where the training CARSI I provides is so vital. They don't just teach you how to scrub and sanitize, they teach you the soft skills too. Emotional intelligence, crisis communication.
So, like knowing how to talk to people who are going through unimaginable loss at the same time you're dealing with all the rest.
Exactly. You might be interacting with someone on literally the worst day of their life. That takes a special kind of person and training. Like one of the things CARSI really emphasizes is how to talk to grieving families. You have to be compassionate, obviously, but also clear about what needs to happen, the cleanup process. It's a tough balance.
Totally. It's like you're not just cleaning a house, you're cleaning a piece of their life.
Right.
That emotional aspect, that's got to take a toll on the crews, too.
Oh, absolutely. Imagine dealing with that kind of heavy energy day in and day out, and it seeps in. CARSI talks about this, how the mental health of these cleanup crews is a major concern. The stress, the emotional burden, it's a real occupational hazard.
It's like, yeah, they put on the hazmat suit for the physical stuff, but what about the emotional hazmat suit?
Right. And just like those biohazards we talked about, neglecting the emotional fallout, that can have serious consequences too. We're talking burnout, compassion fatigue, PTSD even. It's real.
Makes sense, but it's not something you hear about a lot. We talk about first responders, the toll their jobs take, but trauma scene cleaners, they're right there on the front lines too. So what's being done to support them?
Well, CARSI, they stress mental health support just as much as the technical stuff. These folks need access to counseling, therapy, specifically tailored for trauma exposure.
So therapists who get what they're dealing with, the kind of stuff they've seen.
Exactly. But it's not just one-on-one therapy either. Peer support groups where these technicians can connect with others who get it, that's huge. The key is recognizing that emotional well-being is just as important as physical safety in this line of work. It's got to be a priority.
It's interesting, right? We talk about the soft skills needed for a job like this, but honestly, emotional intelligence, support systems, that's important for everyone, no matter what you do.
Couldn't agree more. This whole deep dive, it's really highlighting something bigger about how we deal with tough emotions as individuals, as a society. And I don't just mean the huge, awful traumas either. It's the little things that add up too.
like death by 1,000 paper cuts. But emotionally,
Exactly. Those everyday stresses, the heartbreaks, the anxieties. Are we processing that stuff? Are we giving ourselves and each other the space to do that? It's something to think about.
it's like we all have our own personal emotional cleanup to do, even if it's not as, like, visible as a crime scene.
I like that because it's true. And just like those cleanup crews need the right tools and techniques, we need healthy ways to deal with our own emotional debris. Otherwise, well, it builds up.
Right. Okay, so we've covered the technical stuff, the emotional toll, the need for support. But before we wrap up, you mentioned this being a hidden world. Why do you think that is? Why aren't people talking about this more?
Well, part of it, I think, is that humans naturally shy away from the unpleasant stuff. Death, trauma, it's uncomfortable.
Easier to just not go there.
Exactly. Out of sight, out of mind. Right. Plus, there's still a stigma around anything related to death. We don't want to think about it, and death is definitely messy in every sense. But by pushing it away, we're kind of doing a disservice to the folks who deal with it head on, you know?
It's true. It's like to even acknowledge needing trauma scene cleanup, you have to acknowledge that trauma happens. And that's hard.
Exactly. But the more we shine a light on this hidden world, the more we talk about it, the less taboo it becomes. These folks, they're not just cleaners, they're highly skilled professionals, and they're often the unsung heroes, helping families and communities heal on a practical level and an emotional one.
Totally. So last question, what's one thing you hope listeners take away from this whole conversation?
I'd say just this. We've spent all this time on the emotional toll of cleaning up after trauma. But think about it. What about the toll of just experiencing it? If even dealing with the aftermath is so heavy, what does that say about how we handle emotions in general? As people, as a society, you know?
Whoa. Okay, that's making me think. It's like we focus on the big stuff, the awful events, but you're right, it's all the little stuff too.
Exactly. Little traumas, everyday heartbreaks, just the stress building up. Are we processing that? Are we giving ourselves and each other the space to deal with it well? Something to ponder.
It really is. It's like we each have our own emotional cleanup to do, even if it's not as dramatic as, a crime scene.
Love that analogy. Because it's true. And those cleanup crews, they need the right gear, the training. We need that for our emotional stuff, too. Otherwise, it's just going to pile up.
Man, so true. Well, that is a lot to chew on. Thanks for bringing that perspective. It's not something I would consider before.
Glad to do it. It's all connected, you know?
It really is. And to all our listeners, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of trauma scene cleanup. Hopefully you learned something new, maybe see things a bit differently now. And hey, if this sparks some thoughts about how you deal with the tough emotions, the everyday stuff, that's a win in my book. Keep those conversations going.
Absolutely. Take care of yourselves out there, folks.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Until next time, keep asking those tough questions, keep learning, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.